the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Your hosts are Seth Jacobson and Patrick Heiler.
Chapter 29, Seanchan, and our symbol is the Seanchan helmet.
I don't think we have to do too much explaining about that one.
That's pretty obvious. Geofram Bornhald ignored the smell of burning houses and the bodies that lay sprawled on the dirt. What?
How'd you say that name?
Geofram Bornhald?
Geofram.
Geofram? Well, okay.
Yeah.
Geofram Bornhald ignored the smell of burning houses and the bodies that lay sprawled on the dirt of the street. Bayar and a white-cloaked guard of 100 rode into the village at his heels, half the men he had with him. His legion was too scattered for his liking, with questioners having too many of the commands, but his orders had been explicit. Obey the questioners. There had been but slight resistance here. Only half a dozen dwellings gave off columns of smoke. The inn was still standing, he saw, white-plastered, stone like almost every structure on Almoth Plain.
Geofram Bornhald, who was the guy who captured Perrin and then later followed Elaine to Tarvalin.
Yeah, he's been hustling.
Yeah, and then he was ordered out to Almoth Plain by Pedron Niall to take and hold this area. And he's under the orders of questioners, who we know are ruled over by Caradin, who is a dark friend.
Right.
So that's my summary of the White Cloak so far.
And they're there basically, well, they were there originally basically to stir up enough trouble to eventually take over the area.
Yeah, that was their goal, is that if they had Amadicia and Almoth Plain, they could crush the nation between them and just take over all three areas, and then from there spread out and conquer the whole of the continent.
Theocracies are not so fun.
Pedron Niall, I mean, he's a smart guy. He had his plan. He's a good general. He's doing pretty good if things had gone his way.
Right. And a lot of people have been killed. And I noted here that Geofram sees the bodies of children hung amongst the bodies of adults. And he calls over this guy, Mwad, that works for him, and asks if the Seanchan did it or he did. And he says, neither, my lord captain, and implies that it was questioners.
Well, he describes two people who did it who look an awful lot like questioners.
Yeah.
I mean, and I always think of the questioners as the dark friend arm of the White Cloaks. Like,
more or less.
White Cloaks are bad. All White Cloaks suck. But regular White Cloaks are just crazy drunk with power, whereas I always think of the questioners as actual, like, evil dark friends.
And they are led by a dark friend, so there's that too. But,
right, well, that,
you know,
that
what with the
definitely,
torture and things.
we can pretty much assume
so
anytime a questioner is doing something, it's under the orders of a dark friend.
He had seen questioner tactics before, but this was the first time he had ever been faced with children's bodies. He tells his underling here to cut them down and make sure the people around here don't think it was us that did this.
You know, I want Bornhald to be the better White Cloak, but I cannot give him any leeway. How can he work for a group of people that kill children like this? I can't make him the quote-unquote good White Cloak. He just is still evil in my head. He
does seem to think for himself, but I don't know. Anyone in an army kills for a living.
And they're dealing with two groups, the Teraboners, and the Damane. And we know the Teraboners end up getting, for the most part, recruited into the Seanchan army.
Is it Damane? I always thought it was Domani.
That is correct.
Here's a good example. One of the reasons I like the way Bornhald thinks. Well, he seems to think critically, I guess, which is a very rare quality amongst White Cloaks. So he's like,
other than his blind spots, he is definitely one of the smartest White Cloaks.
Perhaps I should say he's one of the few White Cloaks who has any redeeming qualities.
That's a good way to put it.
That puts him like way high amongst the White Cloaks.
Right.
But, you know, amongst all people, well, anyway. I liked when he says to, I think he's still talking to this guy, Mwad, let us see how we do against the invaders, Bayar, before we look down on these men, yes? The prisoners' faces bore a defeated look that had been there before his men came.
These strangers are the Seanchan.
Right.
This guy's coming in and saying, well, if we fought them, we'd, send them running. And he's like, hold on. Be careful.
Yeah. The White Cloaks are arriving at these villages after the Seanchan already have. So these people are already bloodied. And then the White Cloaks are showing up and bloodying them some more.
Right. And the White Cloaks are very effective bullies. They are able to dominate and pick on anyone who's unorganized. But the second they face an organized channeling army, they are wiped out repeatedly.
Oh, yeah.
I think Bornhald manages to take out like one group of channelers, just one pairing of
Damane.
But even so, he loses like a huge percentage of his army, just taking out one channeler, basically.
Yeah.
Like they're not equipped to face channelers. They're a very traditional force, armed military force.
Bornhald pulled off his gauntlets and sat at one of the tables. He knew too little about the invaders, the strangers. That was what almost everyone called them, those who did not just babble about Artur Hawkwing. He knew they called themselves the Seanchan and Helene. I'm not sure about that pronunciation.
That was, I think, right on.
He had enough of the old tongue to know the latter meant those who come before, or the forerunners. They also called themselves Riagel, those who come home,
yes,
in the old tongue, and spoke of the Koren, the return. He also notes that his requests amongst the SeaFolk had been met with silence, because the SeaFolk don't need to talk to him, and they don't really talk to anyone.
I think the old tongue is actually relatively easy to pronounce, because it is just
mostly phonetic.
Yeah, the old tongue is mostly phonetic. So I like how the SeaFolk don't give him any information on the Seanchan. You'd think they are the people who would have had encounters with the Seanchan before.
I'm pretty sure they run into the Seanchan first, which is also why the SeaFolk know of the Seanchan continent. I'm pretty sure. They know that if you get a certain distance from Randland, boats don't come back.
Or if they go far enough, don't they call it like the Death Islands or something like that?
Isles of the Dead.
And that's basically where the Seanchan are from. Because if you go that way, you die.
Or are pressed into the Seanchan Navy or whatever.
Now, you would think that the Windfinders on the SeaFolk ships would have a chance, but I guess they're not really prepared for fighting. They're more...
That's not what they do.
Yeah.
I had the same thought.
They're more like weather channelers.
Right.
Rather than fighters. And we know that the Damane are pretty much exclusively trained to fight.
Or, maybe these SeaFolk ships run into Seanchan ships when they have a Damane do the shot across the bow like they do to Captain Domon in a second here.
Sure.
If a Windfinder were to try to shoot back, they would just sink the ship.
Can I just comment on, we've got Captain Domon, Damane.
And they're all approximately in the land of the Domani.
Domani, yeah.
So we're sorry about all the mistakes we're about to make.
So we're trying to get the pronunciation right, but there's a lot of very close words here. So forgive us if we get them a little bit wrong.
Maud is talking to a young fellow now, my lord captain, Blair said, and Child Gerald has just ridden in with a message. Bornhald waved for Gerald to begin, and he kind of hurries him up, and he says, basically, "You will give me this message, yes? Not word for word unless I ask it. Simply tell me what he wants." The child, set to recite, swallowed before he began. "My lord captain,
I think it's important to state who he is.
Child Gerald.
This message is coming from Jacob Carradine.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right, who's the head of the questioners and a dark friend.
So Geofram is supposed to follow whatever orders he gets from Carradine at this point.
He is under the direct control of the questioners, so he has to do whatever Carradine says, who's under the compulsion from the Dark Friend Social. So
he said he would, but
yeah.
My lord captain, he says you are moving too many men too close to Toman Head. He says the Dark Friends on Almoth Plain must be rooted out, and you are, forgive me, lord captain, you are to turn back at once and ride toward the heart of the plain. He stood stiffly, waiting. Bornhald studied him. Go and get yourself something to eat, Bornhald told him. There should be wash water in one of these houses, if you wish it. Return to me in an hour. I will have messages for you to carry. He waved the young man out. And Bornhald's assistant, or whatever this guy that's hanging around, is like, maybe the questioners are right. And then I have Bornhald's hand slapping the table cut him off. What dark friends? I have seen nothing in any village that he has ordered taken except farmers and craftsmen, worried that we will burn their livelihoods, and a few old women who tend the sick, which is another thing I like that.
That's one of the few places where I feel like Bornhald actually has a little bit of redeeming quality, or he doesn't persecute innocents. That's a low bar. I'm sorry, that's a very low bar.
That's true, but he has risen above that heinously low bar.
Extremely.
So
congratulations, our hero among the
best among the
white
worst.
Cloaks. Yeah. Pretty fly for a white cloak guy. I like that.
Has it ever occurred to you, buyer, to wonder why Caridin has taken away our banners and the cloaks of the men the questioners lead? Even the questioners themselves have put off the white. This suggests something, yes?
Well, I mean, the reason they've put off their white is because they are basically trying to create a war.
False flag missions.
Absolutely. They're under somebody else's name. They're attacking the enemies. And really themselves.
In Damane uniforms attacking across the border, and
Tarabon.
Taraboners, or white cloaks in Tarabon uniforms attacking in the opposite direction to try to bait each nation to attack the other. Which is clever, really. Yeah. Two nations with an already otherwise very complex history. It wouldn't take much to start a war, and that's what the white cloaks are trying to do. Bornhald says, when Gerald rides, he will not ride alone. Messages will go to every group of children I know how to find. I mean to take the Legion onto Toman Head, buyer, and see what the true Dark Friends, the Seanchan, are up to, which is directly against the orders he just received.
So he's
saying that is a stupid order, and that's not what we're doing.
Yeah. And there's an interesting scene where Caridin confronts Pedron Niall, and Niall sees right through him, where he's like, well, if you claim there were Dark Friends on Toman Head, why weren't you there fighting too?
Yeah.
Why was he there against your orders? And so that...
Right, if there were Dark Friends on Toman Head, then why did you order the White Cloaks away?
Exactly.
Not that the Seanchan are a huge group of Dark Friends. That's not true either. But
I mean, if the White Cloaks just use the word Dark Friend for enemy, then yes, they are Dark Friends.
Fair enough.
And so, yeah, Bornhald's convinced that there are Dark Friends here in Falme, but they're not on the Plain. On the Plain, it's just a bunch of innocent farmers.
Right. The young soldier that Bornhald sent for before shows up, and he goes about intimidating him, and he just wants to... He's going to question him about the Seanchan to find out everything that he can.
Mm-hmm.
Bornhald drew his dagger and began trimming his nails. He had never understood why that made some men nervous, but he used it just the same.
I always kind of remember that. That reminds me a lot of the scene where Julian Sandar, he sends for the 3 ingredients.
We were talking about that recently.
Yeah, just in the previous chapter.
I forget how it came up.
Yeah. But that's sort of a similar, it's a vague enough threat that people are just sort of imagining, well, what else could he do with the knife?
It's the implication.
Exactly. So that's pretty much it for the White Cloaks. Just sort of a quick little, what are they thinking and where are their troops? And then we switch to Bayle Domon, and we get a glimpse of our favorite pirate.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite characters, really. I like him.
He's one of those, tertiary characters that turns up in all the right times and all the right locations.
He's always kind of around.
It's like everybody knows him, but he's not a major character.
Right.
Because he's almost all the main characters have been on his ship at one time or another. And he's got that great, I don't even know what it's called, but the verb construction that happens when he says do be instead of it is. I
forget what you call that. Are there any English majors in Discord right now?
But it's very endearing. It's like Yoda's little backwards word construction.
Yeah.
It's he's sort of the Yoda of the Wheel of Time, Bayle Domon. He do be the Yoda of the Wheel of Time.
The long swells of the Arathoshan made the spray roll, but Domon spread feet balanced him as he held the long tube of the looking glass to his eye and studied the large vessel that pursued them. Pursued and was slowly overtaking. Skip ahead a little. The strangers, Captain? Yarin had the sound of sweat in his voice. Is it a stranger ship? Seanchan, he said, and he heard Yarin groan. So Domon's out there hustling like he does, and he just wants to keep his head down and avoid this. He doesn't care what's happening, really. He just wants to make his money.
Yeah, and he thinks he can just avoid them like he does with most ships by heading to the shallows. He's got this riverboat, basically, that's designed to have a pretty shallow draft.
Yeah.
Which also means he can't really go that far out into the ocean.
As opposed to this Seanchan ship, which is
Right.
for the deep sea.
But he figures he can just take it into the shallows and avoid them. Well, avoid a Guinan who's on that ship.
Right. And he does. He steers it to a place where the Seanchan ship can't go.
And he's coming from Tanchico. He picked up a bunch of fireworks there.
He's been selling those up the coast and hearing these crazy stories. Damane had thought he was hearing nonsense until he was shown the blackened ground. I highlighted of that the Damane had attacked, where the Damane had attacked villages.
And he's still heading this direction because he's trying to get away. Because remember, he had dark friends who were trying to get him to go to the east so
Right.
he could get trapped. And so he's heading as far west as he can go because he really wants to get us. I mean, he's basically gone to the westmost point of the continent to get away from them.
Yeah. Domon notes, the Seanchan told astonished people they must swear again oaths they had forsaken, though never deigning to explain when they had forsaken them, or what the oaths meant. The young women were taken away one by one and examined, and some were carried aboard the ships and never seen again. A few older women had also vanished, some of the guides and healers.
Basically, anyone who's a channeler.
Mm-hmm.
Those would all be people who were born with the spark, not people who could learn how to channel.
I assume it would be either one, because don't they do the same test? And if you're born with a spark, you become Damane, and if you're born with just the ability, you can be what do they call it? The one with the other end of the Adam.
The Soldam.
Soldam. That's right.
But I think they're just testing for girls with the spark. They're just testing for Damane at this point. I don't think they're testing for Soldam. Because to test for Soldam, they just put the bracelet on you and see if you can feel.
Right.
And I don't think they're doing that. I think for the test for the spark, I think that's just putting the girls near.
I think they just walk them by a Damane.
Yeah, they just walk them by a Damane and they just can sense whether or not you can channel.
And skipping ahead a bit, and when the people had been thoroughly cowed, when they had been made to kneel and swear, bewildered, to obey the forerunners, await the return, and serve those who come home with their lives, the Seanchan sailed away, and usually never returned. Falme, it was said, was the only town they held fast.
I have one question here. The Taraboners spoke confidently of their soldiers driving the invaders into the sea, but in every coastal town it was different. Why? At what point does the Taraboners drive the Seanchan back into the sea?
I don't know.
That seems very odd. It seems like they would just lose. Do you think it's...
I noticed that too. It could be bluffing.
I think it's just bluffing, because I can't imagine how the Taraboners would have any success against the Seanchan.
Damane had no intention of meeting any Seanchan if he could avoid it.
Yeah, good luck with that, buddy. Try marrying one. I don't want to meet any Seanchan, and you find yourself married to one later on. Jordan loves proving his characters wrong.
Yeah. He was raising the glass to see what he could make out on the nearing Seanchan decks, when, with a roar, the surface of the sea broke into fountaining water and flame not 100 paces from its larboard side. Before he had even begun to gape, another column of flame split the sea on the other side, and as he was spinning to stare at that, another burst up ahead. The eruptions died as quickly as they were born, spray from them blown across the deck. Where they had been, the sea bubbled and steamed as if boiling.
Basically a shot across the bow.
Yeah.
Warning shot.
Like, look, we can destroy you, so...
And with that sort of pinpoint accuracy, front, left, right, he knows that's like, no mistake, we could do this right in the center if we wanted to, where you are. And that's crazy. Flame inside a fountain of water? No thank you.
Damane shook his head. Whatever they did, they can shatter us. Even do I take her into the breakers. He shivered, thinking of the flame inside the fountains of water. His holds full of fireworks. Fortune pricked me. We might not live to drown.
Oh, yeah, if the flame hit the fireworks, I
Yeah.
mean, we saw what it did to the building. It would just vaporize the ship, yeah.
Bring her into the wind, Yaren, and down sail. Quickly, man, quickly, before they think we still try to escape.
Put your hands up. Don't shoot.
Yeah. hands up, don't shoot. And as soon as Damane pulls his sail down, the Seanchan put a longboat into the sea, and they come over with, it says 10 oars, so half a dozen soldiers or so, and a Soldam and Damane.
And of course, the leader gets off, takes off her helmet, and this is Eginin.
The first to climb up was one of the armored men, and Damane saw immediately why some of the villagers claimed the Seanchan themselves were monsters. The helmet looked very much like some monstrous insect's head, with thin red plumes like feelers. The wearers seemed to be peering out through mandibles. It was painted and gilded to increase the effect, and the rest of the man's armor was also worked with paint and gold. Overlapping plates in black and red, outlined with gold, covered his chest, and ran down the outsides of his arms and the fronts of his thighs. Even the steel backs of his gauntlets were red and gold. When he did not wear metal, his clothes were dark leather. The two-handed sword on his back, with its curved blade, was scabbarded and hilted in black and red and leather. Then the armored figure removed his helmet, and Damane stared. He was a woman. Her dark hair was cut short, and her face was hard, but there was no mistaking it. He had never heard of such a thing, except among the Aiel, and Aiel were well known to be crazed. Lots of jokes about how it's love at first sight. Even though she casually backhands him in a second.
I mean,
Whatever
isn't that
you're
love?
into,
It just hits you right in the face.
As long as it's consensual, I don't care.
I don't think that was consensual.
No, it was not.
Jordan does love guys falling in love with girls with blue eyes at first sight. Gareth Bryn falls in love with Tuan at first sight because of her blue eyes.
Did Harriet have blue eyes? The Seanchan women surveyed the ship arrogantly, then picked Damane out as captain. It had to be him or Yaren. By their clothes, the way Yaren had his eyes closed and was muttering prayers under his breath pointed to Damane and fixed him with a stare like a spike. Are there any women among your crew or passengers? She spoke with a soft slurring that made her hard to understand, as if she was from Texas, guys. I'm pretty sure that's from Robert Jordan himself.
All right. I lived in Texas.
Yeah.
And when he says they talk slow like a Texas accent, I don't think he's saying they have a drawl like a Texas accent. And I think that it's important to separate the two.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you ever heard like a Southern like speed talker go,
Sure.
Like you can talk fast and still have a Southern drawl to your accent. Anyway, yeah, you can talk slow without having that. I don't think they sound Texan. I think they just talk slow.
Well, it says she spoke with a soft slurring that made her hard to understand. But there was a snap in her voice that said she was used to getting answers. Speak up, man. If you're a captain, if not, wake that other fool and tell him to speak. I do be captain, my lady, Damane said cautiously. I have no passengers, and there be no women in my crew.
Which I think is probably the primary reason they're stopping ships and pulling them over.
Gathering all Amarith Damane.
Yeah.
Making sure there aren't any.
They want every possible woman who can channel. Anyway, in or out.
And we know they're worth a lot of money. So this is almost like, to people from the Seanchan culture, to these invaders, it would be like if you invaded a land and there were just like, literally the street was paved out of gold. You would just get there and pick up the street as soon as you saw it. Because and the Damane are worth more than that.
It's like white Europeans in Africa.
Yes, like that.
I mean, it's basically just picking up free money that actually is people and selling them. Because
Eginin mentions later that like her Damane costed her a ton.
And they're shipping a lot of them back to Seanchan.
Right, and it's
across the ocean.
Very rare. But these ship captains and invaders are going to make a ton of money off importing these female channelers back to Seanchan.
A ton. Well, and it's a little bit different because it's more, they're individually very, very expensive, whereas usually slaves were not, I mean...
Well, right.
Slaves were certainly not cheap, but because they are such a small percentage of the population,
right.
You know, supply and demand make them much more valuable than your standard labor slave.
And not just wealth, but status comes from not only owning them, but giving them as a gift to someone with higher status than you. Which is also why Eginin is so excited in a second to find that piece of Quendiar. Mm-hmm. Because she knows her her commanding officer essentially will be happy to receive it.
The Seanchan really do seem to have two currencies, which is one, money, and two, social status.
Yeah.
And they keep very careful track of both of those.
Essentially money and favors. Because, she gives him the piece of Quendiar. She gives Turak the piece of Quendiar, the seal.
Right.
And he's really happy with it. And he says, I'll mention your name to the Empress. And she almost has a spasms. She's so excited.
Well, because that's how you get promoted. That's how you get more status.
Right. He's saying, well, thanks for the favor.
Right.
I'll mention your name to the right people. And when we're done with this operation, it's going to be new people to hire.
Keep this up. You might be one of them.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and she definitely has ambition. She's an ambitious person. She talks about that.
Mm-hmm. The two women dressed as women were coming up from the longboat.
The two women dressed as women?
That's what Domon sees it as. Because he's very surprised that when Aeginin takes off her helmet.
Oh, because she's dressed as a soldier.
He even says, yeah. And then he removed his helmet, and he was a woman. He's really blown away by it.
I didn't see the line right away, I was like, I assumed you'd made a mistake.
Oh, no.
You were like, the two Damane dressed as women or something like that. Yeah.
So he's making a distinction now. The two women dressed as women were coming up from the longboat, one drawing the other. Domon blinked by a leash of silvery metal as she climbed aboard. And he goes on to describe it, but we know what an Adam looks like.
Well, I mean, this is the first time we see one.
The leash went from a bracelet worn by the first woman to a collar around the neck of the second. He could not tell whether it was woven or jointed. It seemed somehow to be both, but it was clearly of a piece, with both bracelet and collar.
I always wondered about the woven and jointed thing, and how it's both and neither. And I was wondering if you had any perspective on, what that would look like, or how you think that works.
I mean, we know it's an item of the power, so it can be made out of metal and have properties that it shouldn't necessarily, or you wouldn't think it could.
Right.
I always imagine it as basically, have you ever seen a braided wire keychain or something like that? That it flexes to some degree.
Sure.
But it's not but that's literally braided. I just imagine that's what it looks like.
But I also imagine that when they say jointed, that it's kind of like the clamps on my brewery, where it's got one clamp and then two solid edges with a joint that snaps open. And then, basically, I'm making a motion with my hands. But you've got a joint at one end and a clasp at the other, and two half circles.
For the collar. It's two pieces, basically, with a hinge and a lock.
Exactly.
On one and the other side.
And then what's between those is sort of a woven structure.
Yeah.
But when it locks together, you can't really tell where the hinge or the latch are.
Right.
They just sort of go back to being this woven together.
Or maybe there's a pattern on it.
So the woman who is wearing the collar is in a gray dress, and she's the one who is the channeler born with the spark. And the woman who has the bracelet on is the one who can be taught how to channel. And she's got the silver lightning bolts on her blue dress.
On red panels, yeah. And I noted here that she holds the leash in coils, so it's quite long. I don't know that we ever get a description of exactly how long.
I always think of it as a dog leash length.
Yeah. Long enough that, for instance, I'm imagining they just climbed a ladder, one in front of the other. So it'd have to be fairly, at least as long as a person.
Sure. 6 feet, 7 feet, something like that.
Yeah.
That's what I'd guess.
I'm going to guess, somewhere in between 6 and 10 feet.
2 to 3 meters for those of you who use rational systems of measurement.
That's all Domon's observations, but Aeginin responding to what he had said before, I have no passengers, and there be no women in my crew. Aeginin responds, speak slowly, man, the blue-eyed woman demanded in her slurred speech. You're even harder to understand than the rest in this light-forsaken land. So they're both having trouble sort of understanding each other, whatever this accent is.
Well, he certainly is hard enough to understand with his do be and reversal of words, and they're about as far opposite in terms of language as you can get in the Randland world.
Right, and their two groups have been isolated from each other for 2,000 years?
Oh, they shouldn't even be speaking the same language.
Yeah, I know.
That's
it's amazing that they can understand each other at all.
The fact that language didn't drift very much in that time period is definitely something that people have argued about. And I just let it pass as a factor of writing books, and you still, need to have all your characters communicate. So I give Jordan a pass on that one on language, but it is a bit odd that they still all speak the same words.
Yeah, I shrug it off because otherwise he would have had to write like 6 more languages,
right,
to make this all fit.
Well, and just the fact that we went from the old tongue to what I'm calling common, what feels like overnight, and then common just like stayed the same for like 2,000 years.
Yeah, we've talked about that before. We don't know when this shift happened, but it seems to have happened fairly abruptly.
Because it definitely happened after the breaking.
Well after
the breaking. But yet, it must have happened before Arthur Hawkwing in his time.
Right. Because he sent...
So
wait, Luther...
His son, yeah.
It was his son. That's right.
So I always imagine that perhaps the shift from Old Tongue to Common maybe was happening before Arthur Hawkwing, but he spoke quote-unquote Common and spread that to the known world. So if I imagine there was a time when the shift happened, it would be during Arthur Hawkwing's time. Because that's sort of when he conquers the whole continent.
During the War of the 100 Years, there's a further, or I maybe should say accelerated decrease in people who live longer than 100 years. There's way less Aes Sedai after Arthur Hawkwing.
Sure.
And there's a ton of instability. Because after his unification war, everything falls apart really quickly.
It would make sense, though, that the Aes Sedai may be a source of language stability because they live longer than 100 years. You have people that live
for 500 years.
So that could be that's a good point, that Aes Sedai could definitely not abort, but
suppress.
Suppress
the change.
Language drift.
Yeah. Damane asks if they're Aes Sedai, these Damane, actually.
Which is his way of saying, can they channel?
He
just doesn't have a way to ask, are they channelers, without asking,
are they Aes Sedai? He doesn't know what else to call it.
Yeah.
He says that after, I should say, they get on the boat, and he stares at this bizarre sight of a woman leading another woman by a leash and collar. And Aguinan says, "You admire my Damane? She cost me dear, but she was worth every coin. Few but nobles own a Damane, and most are property of the throne. She is strong, traitor. She could have broken your ship to splinters had I wished it so."
Do we ever figure out which Damane this is?
Does anyone know the answer to that? Aguinan owns her for a good amount longer, so maybe we get a name, but...
Mackenzie is saying Sarisa?
Oh, really?
How'd you put that one together? It's in Crown of Swords, Chapter 1. Your Google Foo is strong.
Domon asks if she's Aes Sedai. He never saw the casual backhand blow coming. He staggered as her steel-backed gauntlet split his lip. "That name is never spoken," Aguinan said with a dangerous softness. "There are only Damane, the leashed ones, and now they serve in truth as well as in name." Her eyes made ice seem warm. Domon swallowed blood and kept his hand clenched at his sides.
Love at first split lip.
And then she instructs him to sail his vessel to Falme, where it will be searched. And if he's telling the truth about everything, he'll be left to do his business openly again.
I wanted to ask you about the oaths. The 3 oaths. Well, not the 3 oaths, but these 3 oaths. To obey, to await, and to serve.
Yeah.
Your ancestors should have remembered. Where do you think those come from? Do you think they were part of Arthur Hawkwing's empire that was sworn, and then the Seanchan left?
I'm glad you bring that up.
Or do you think that it was something that the Seanchan invented while they were off doing their thing in another land?
It's probably both to some degree, I would expect, but I don't understand why Arthur Hawkwing would, on his deathbed, be wait for this one guy to return to the empire that's mine. What? That doesn't make any sense. And they're not the only army of Artur Hawkwing. They're just one of them. They're one of the many, many. So, why would you await this one particular group that was sent to conquer a distant land, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. Or unless they mean to await the return of Artur Hawkwing himself.
So I think it was a legend that sprang up in Seanchan after they left.
And they somehow must have also known that the people of Ranland were no longer ruled by Artur Hawkwing's blood, or no longer unified.
Maybe.
Unless they're just finding that out now.
Was his son sent away before or after Artur Hawkwing died?
Yeah, a little before that, I think.
Okay.
But there would have been no contact in the interim unless...
No, I don't think so.
Unless we count whatever information they may have been able to glean from the SeaFolk. Because they're the only people that can cross the ocean. The only other people that can cross the ocean. Yeah. But I mean, Berlan is a descendant of Artur Hawkwing.
That's a good point. She is a direct descendant.
You know?
Why could she not show up at Falme and be like, guys, shut up. I rule this place.
I'm shrugging emphatically. I don't...
It was one of the things that always confused me about the Seanchan is where do they come up with these oaths? Why do they think people should obey them?
I think it's something like what Christine's saying here, probably. She says, I think it's just part of their lore used to legitimize their need for domination. You know, it's been 1,000 years that they've been conquering 2,000 years that they've been conquering this continent. And now they're returning. So this is like biblical level history. This is like so long ago that people don't even really know what happened back then. Like there are some records, but they're not even very good.
I think of it as like manifest destiny, maybe.
The blood, I'm putting in quotes, the blood probably being...
Like the nobility, you mean?
Yeah, rising to a even higher level of nobility than they were before. So the kind of division in society is huge, from people who are literally property, who are not even allowed to have a name, to people who are not allowed to be looked at or spoken in front of.
Right.
There's this huge division, which I doubt existed in Artur Hawkwing's time. Their society has changed. And so maybe they're kind of telling themselves a bit of a story. You know what I mean?
Well, and Mackenzie brings up the quote that I was thinking about, where Ishmael said he sent away Hawkwing's armies and sealed 2 dooms. Hawkwing's and then the doom.
Oh, damn. Props on that. So it was probably Ishmael that made this.
So that's what I assume, is that there's a corrupting... That's where I was kind of trying to go eventually, is that while they were over in Seanchan, they had at least a corrupting influence, or at least were sent off with a corrupt purpose at Ishmael.
Yeah, he just would have had to seed this little bit of, like, they're waiting for you to come back.
Exactly.
You know?
And we do know he was whispering in Hawking's ear before he died. And so probably that whole mission was at his behest.
Yeah, and he was around during the Trolloc Wars. He could have visited again.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
He has no problem traveling. So she basically says, you're coming with us to Falme. We'll escort you there.
Mm-hmm. And you swear your oaths, agree to have your ship searched, don't resist, and as long as everything you just said was true, we're cool. Not sorry for slapping you in the face, by the way. And Damane has several thoughts about how he's definitely not going to be doing any resisting. But he doesn't really have anything to worry about. From these people, has, legit cargo, and there's nothing illegal going on here.
Except for that Quendiar seal that the Dark Friends have been after since he left the Borderlands.
But it's not illegal.
No.
It's just
Quendiar.
Yeah.
Just valuable.
It was a long passage to Falme, and Domon finally persuaded the Seanchan to talk a little. The one Seanchan that was left on the deck of their ship. Everybody leaves except for this one guy.
Yeah, and he's just kind of a low-ranking... He's just like there to make sure they do what they're supposed to do.
His name was Kaban.
And I looked him up. He doesn't appear in any other chapters or scenes.
So I don't know what his rank is or anything.
She gathered her people except for a single man in plain armor, which marked him of low rank. As much as the depth of his bow to Captain Eginin. So he's just like probably the lowest ranked dude on there. Just like, yeah, you get to be the hostage. Congratulations.
And you just, stay there to remind them that we want our dude back. And if anything happens to him.
If you don't come back alive, we'll avenge you. Bye. Yeah.
Damane tries to get what he can out of the guy, and he gets nothing, basically, except like some drinking stories. He seems like a pretty average kind of soldier. On the way to Falme. Falme stood on a spit of land at the very tip of Toman Head, with nothing further west of it except the Arath Ocean. High cliffs ran to the harbor mouth on both sides, and atop one of those, where every ship running into the harbor had to pass under them, stood the towers of the watchers over the waves. A cage hung over the side of one of the towers, with a man sitting in it despondently, legs dangling through the bars. "Who is that?" Damane asks. "Gabon." "That is the first watcher. Not the one who sat in the chair when we first came, of course. Every time he dies, they choose another, and we put him in the cage." "But why?" Damane demanded. Gabon's grin showed too many teeth. They watched for the wrong thing, and forgot when they should have been remembering.
Now, we don't get a whole lot of other information about the Watchers. We saw them a little bit in the Dark Prophecy at the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
But as far as I can tell, and I looked them up, they're an order that were waiting for Arthur Hawkwings to return over the ocean. And they built these towers at various points along the coast to man and to watch. And you would think that those people who remember Arthur Hawkwing's armies and build the towers would be the first to bow down and be praised by the Seanchan. I'm thinking at some point they were watching as a warning to say, hey, there are enemies coming, and that's why they're being punished.
Oh, probably.
And that the Seanchan are saying, you were watching as a warning, not watching as, to herald us. You should have been our heralds. And they don't remember whatever bullshit oaths.
Yeah.
The Seanchan want them to remember.
I think that probably has more to do with whatever the Seanchan are expecting, and, for the reasons we suspect, they may be expecting something that isn't there, which is Ishmael.
Or was never there to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next thing I have is down the dock, a thing appeared. When Damane has left the ship, informed that it's about to be searched, and he is marched away, and he sees a Grom.
Yeah, I was going to say we see two Seanchan / Porter World beasts in this chapter. The first one's a Grom, and the second one is a...
I'm waiting for you on this because I can't remember the names of the different animals. Torm. That's right. There's Torm, Corum, Grom.
Yeah.
There's all weird words.
But they all kind of sound like going through your nose. And we've seen one of these before, of course, in the Portal World with Celine and Rand.
Wild Grom. The Seanchan captain, Eginin, comes off the ship with... something wrapped in a piece of yellow silk, Damane noted warily. Something small enough to carry in one hand, but which he held carefully in both.
Quendiar seal. So that's what he's been chased ever since the Eye of the World for, is after that seal.
Yeah, but Damane doesn't seem concerned. He says, "You see, Captain," to Eginin, "I do be a peaceful trader. Perhaps your people would care to buy some fireworks." "Perhaps, trader." There was an air of suppressed excitement about her that made him uneasy, and her next words increased the feeling. "You will come with me."
Well, and they have no interest in fireworks because they have Damane skylights.
Right. I don't know that she knows what fireworks are.
I think they do. I think they're like, oh yeah, that cute little toy, fireworks, night flowers, whatever. Mm-hmm. Blah. Are the fireworks or night flowers, and what the Damane do are skylights? Domon's surprised that the local people are still armed, but she basically says, well, once they swear the oaths, there are people, so we don't care if they're armed.
She stopped some random guy on the street to kind of prove her point.
Right. What she doesn't say is, yeah, it doesn't really matter if they're armed because we can just blow them out of the freaking sky with our
Yeah.
channelers and magical beasts.
Right.
Sure, have a sword, whatever.
What are you going to do with that?
The next thing I have is the description of the Tourim.
I'll read that because it's the first time in the series we see one. Aginan and his guards did not look around either when a mounted Seanchan troop passed them, climbing the street. The soldiers rode creatures that looked almost like cats, the size of horses, but with lizard scales rippling bronze beneath their saddles. Clawed feet grasped cobblestones. A three-eyed head turned to regard Domon as the troop climbed by. Aside from everything else, it seemed too knowing for Domon's peace of mind. He stumbled and almost fell. I just interpret that as it being a very intelligent animal.
I interpret it as being a cat the size of a horse.
Yeah.
With scales. Bronze scales.
A little bit of experience handling wild animals and plenty with domestic animals, and there's a distinct difference in the way like a Labrador retriever regards you and I always think of this one time I got to handle a fox that was not domesticated, or I was like in a room with it, and the way it looks at you is like the way you would expect a nervous person to look at you. Like they're watching. There's I don't know how to explain it exactly, but there's
domesticated animals have a social intelligence.
Right.
And when I'm in a room with a domesticated animal, I feel like I kind of know what's going on in their head. They kind of know what's going on in my head, and we can like negotiate around that and like interact. Wild animals see you as a danger, and there is no amount of soothing or interacting or placating that's going to convince them that you're not a danger.
I kind of wanted to explain it this way. If some more intelligent and powerful creature snapped me up out of the wild city of Portland and put me in a room and like tried to feed me something, I would be regarding it in the way that I believe that animal was regarding me. Like it's like you can almost feel the suspicion, you know, the like consideration of what to do next.
I probably wouldn't be putting my head in its lap.
No, definitely not. It bit me, by the way. That's how that story ends. I tried to soothe it, and I like sat on the ground and didn't look directly at it.
What was it?
Very small room. It was a fox. And I took a piece of cooked chicken and I like threw it over there, and it like ate it and kind of like watched me some more. And then I tried to feed it, and it like approached me and was like, watching me, being very careful. And I went to trying to think of how to describe this. I like took the piece of chicken in 2 fingers and I like fully extended my arm and like looked in the other direction so that it wouldn't freak out, so that it would get closer to me. And it just like jumped in and snapped the chicken so fast that it like shredded my 2 fingers. It was not trying to attack me. That was totally my fault. But
right, it was trying to get the chicken.
Yeah, and get the fuck out of there as fast as possible.
But it has no regards for you.
No, it was just nervous.
Exactly. Was it a radioactive fox?
What? No.
Are you a fox man?
I had a friend that was interested in exotic pets, and it's a long story.
You can domesticate foxes, or there are domesticated foxes, but they're not many.
It was like, it didn't seem like it had gone through the full process.
Well, it has to, it's a genetic thing. You have to breed them.
Yeah.
Wild birds. So I've grown up with caws and birds and stuff like that. And they are also wild animals. They're just a little more intelligent than your average wild animal, which lets you negotiate with them a little bit better.
Yeah.
But like, for example, when I was growing up, my mother rescued a cockatiel, the bigger one, not a cockatoo, which are small, but the cockatiel, which are bigger.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting that right. And that sucker for 3 years would attack anything that got near it. It tore towels to pieces, hands to pieces, but we just had to sit with it and basically feed it. And it took about 3 years to get that bird to trust us. But it was never a tame animal. It was just a trusting individual.
I could see that.
And so you can get there with intelligent animals, wild animals, but they're not domesticated. The next thing I have is Domon encountering the High Lord Turak.
Yeah. Damane began to sweat. He smelled a lord in this. It was never good to do business with a lord on the lord's own ground. And he kind of follows Aginan's lead. There's a certain way to regard the blood where she gets down on her knees and he just looks at her and she's like, get down.
It's a little bit like Rand in front of Queen Morghese, only it's like get down on your knees and kiss the goddamn floor.
Which he does not do.
No.
It's like they can't tell if you're doing that or not.
Kiss the fucking floor. It's dirty.
Kissing the floor. This is ridiculous. But he knows better to say anything. You were in the presence of the High Lord Turak, the yellow-haired man intoned, who leads those who come before, and succors the return. Succors?
Suckers.
It's not a word I come across very much. He says, your name is Aginan to her, and I wanted to note here that she says, I was so named on my sword day, High Lord. She replied humbly, in much the way that the Borderlanders have. Their birthday is their day they're allowed to have their own sword.
Right. When someone asks you what your age is, you tell them how long you've had your sword.
Right.
And it does seem that the Seanchan change names a little bit, like people in Randland change titles.
But it seems like it may be a similar tradition.
Yeah, I'm sure that she probably had a name as a child, and then once she was given her sword, she was given a sword name of Aginan. Mm-hmm. So she probably grew up with another name.
Yeah.
Which makes it a little less jarring when her name switches to Llewellyn.
Right. Llewellyn Shipless, is that it? And Turak goes on and says, this is a fine specimen Aginan, quite rare. Do you wish a payment? And he's referring to the seal, the Quendiar seal.
Right. Well, just the fact that she brings him Quendiar.
Yeah. It's very, very rare. That the High Lord is pleased is payment enough. I live to serve, High Lord. I will mention your name to the Empress, Aginan. After the return, new names will be called to the blood. Show yourself fit, and you may shed the name Aginan for a hire. The High Lord honors me. Yes, you may leave. I liked that. Yes, I do honor you.
I honor you good. Get the fuck out.
And she backs away in a similar reverent way. And then Turak starts questioning Damane. He says, you may rise. And he says, do you know what this is? And Damane says, no, which is a lie.
No!
I don't know what the fuck that is.
No traitor lasted long who could not lie with a straight
exactly
face.
That is. No, High Lord. Damane's reply was steady as a rock. And yet you kept it in a secret place, Turak counters. I do collect old things, High Lord, from times past. There do be those who would steal such, did they lay easy to hand. Turak regarded the black and white disc for a moment. This is Quendiar, traitor. Do you know that name? And older than you perhaps know. Come with me.
I'd say it's about 3,000 years old, give or take.
Yep, almost exactly. And Turak takes him into a separate room where he has a giant hutch, I'm imagining, that's filled with all sorts of different objects that are made of Quendiar specifically.
I imagine like a little old lady with a bunch of like unicorn figurines on a glass, a hutch lit from below.
Exactly like that,
yeah,
except
exactly.
Indestructible unicorn figurines.
Right.
And we see this later, but there are plenty of mundane objects made out of Quendiar, like, forks and knives, plates and glasses, and things like that. So not all of them are necessarily an item of power in the way that like a...
Oh, no, most of the items are just meant to be indestructible. It's like, I'm guessing a lot of the Old Aes Sedai practiced on relatively mundane objects, like we see them doing when Egwene is trying to teach the accepted and the novices how to create Quendiar.
Right.
They're like just practicing on bases and stuff like that.
And then they last forever, so...
Right.
But in the text here it said, shelves holding an assortment of figurines, cups, bowls, vases, 50 different things, no two alike in size or shape. Damane notes in his head that the collection is worth like a small nation. It's...
Oh, it would beggar a king,
yeah.
He says. Well, and I think the next line is really important. Damane's breath caught as Turak carefully set the disc beside its exact twin.
That's right. Turak has two
So
Seals.
he had one brought from Seanchan.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've seen 3 seals. One came from the borderlands, one came from Seanchan, and probably went with Arthur Hawkwing and his armies originally. And then one was found in...
Also in the
well.
borderlands, I think. Right? Because, do you mean one was found in the Eye of the World?
One was found in the Eye of the World.
And then where did
And
Domon
Domon
say he found the other one? Was it in the borderlands?
It was in
as
the
well?
borderlands.
But
yeah.
on the other side.
But yeah, just at the top of the river. Basically, the river Aranan.
That sounds right. He got it somewhere to the north from some guy who didn't know what he was selling.
Yeah. Who may or may not have been a mail channeler.
Was it in Meridon? That sounds right to
Yeah,
me.
Meridon. That's totally right.
High Lord, please accept this piece as a gift, Domon tries to say. He did not want to let it go, but that was better than angering this Seanchan. Maybe the Dark Friends will chase him now. It's funny because it's true.
Yeah, they've been chasing him the whole way.
I do be but a simple trader. I want only to trade. Let me sail, and I do promise that... Turak's expression never changed. But the man with the braid cut Domon off with a snapped, unshaven dog. You speak of giving the High Lord what Captain Aguinan has already given. You bargain as if the High Lord were a merchant. You will be flayed alive over 9 days, dog, and... The barest motion of Turak's finger silenced him. I cannot allow you to leave me, traitor, the High Lord said. In this shadowland of oath-breakers, I find none who can converse with a man of sensibilities. But you are a collector. Perhaps your conversation will be interesting. He took the chair, lolling back in its curves to study Domon. Domon put on what he hoped was an ingratiating smile. High Lord, I do be a simple trader, a simple man. I do know have the way of talking with great lords.
This reminds me a little bit of Arabian Nights. Well, the tales, the 1,000 Tales of Arabian Nights. The story is that, and I don't have the details in front of me right now, but there was basically a character who was captured by a king and said, I'm going to kill you. And he's like, well, let me tell you a tale instead. And then he says, and I'll tell you just as good of a tale tomorrow night. And so for 1,000 nights, he tells him tale after tale after tale after tale. So that's the story of the 1,000 Arabian Nights and where the stories come from. It's a collection of stories, and sort of the overarching story or the sort of narrative framework is that the quote unquote author is telling stories to save his own life.
Yeah,
and so that's what I always think of as Bayle Domon here in this situation, as sort of the telling the 1,000 tales of the Arabian Nights.
The man with the braid glared at him, but Turak seemed not to hear. From behind one of the screens, a slim, pretty young woman appeared on quick feet to kneel beside the High Lord, offering a lacquer tray bearing a single cup, thin and handleless, of some steaming black liquid. Her dark, round face was vaguely reminiscent of the SeaFolk. I thought that was kind of interesting. Turak took the cup carefully in his long-nailed fingers, never looking at the young woman, and inhaled the fumes. And I feel like I should probably say this cough is likely coffee or espresso.
Oh, sure, yeah. With the small cups, I always thought it was an espresso drink.
Espresso. It makes more sense if it's served in such a tiny amount.
Right. But I mean, it's coffee.
Yeah.
However they're preparing it. Discord corrected me, or is clarifying.
Scheherazade? Scheherazade. Ooh, I got it.
Sure, once you have the pronunciation key.
Well, yeah, somebody just put that in front of me. But I mean, that wasn't...
So she apparently was taken prisoner, and it was a she who was taken prisoner, not a he. And,
in the story from Arabian Nights?
Yeah, in the story from Arabian Nights.
This Dako Vale was either... She could have been captured recently, even. Because we know the SeaFolk have had contact with the Seanchan. It's wild speculation, but...
Wait, what is?
The Dako Vale, Domon notes that she looks a lot like a SeaFolk, and she probably is.
Totally could be a Windfinder.
Or the descendant of one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Domon took one look at the girl and pulled his eyes away with a strangled gasp. Her white silk robe was embroidered with flowers, but so sheer he could see right through it, and there was nothing beneath but her own slimness. The aroma of kaf, Turak said, is almost as enjoyable as the flavor. That's what I say every morning when I drink my cup of coffee.
The best part of conquering Randland is cough in your cup.
Now, trader, I have learned that Quendiar is even more rare here than in Seanchan. Tell me how a simple trader came to possess a piece. He sipped his cough and waited. Damane took a deep breath and set about trying to lie his way out of Falme. I really liked that ending. I like these characters. I don't know what that says about me, but like Matt, Domon.
Characters that don't necessarily follow the rules.
Yeah, they know what the rules are, and then they just operate within them to however...
Outside of them, yeah.
I suppose it remote.
But they're moral people, too.
Yeah.
You know, they're not, and they're smart people.
Yeah, they're not bad. Like, Domon's not a good guy, but he's going to break the rules when and where he can.
You mean he's not a bad guy?
Oh, right, that's what I meant. Yeah, he's not a bad guy. He's a good dude.
All right.
I'd hang out with him.
I'd have a beer with him. How's that lukewarm coffee?
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Okay. We're having some cough to celebrate these upcoming chapters where we get to interact with the Seanchan for the first time.
Yeah, that scene with Turak huffing the coffee in the morning, that's me every day of my life.
Yeah, I've a day without coffee for me is a day with a headache.
Except it's not served by a glorified stripper.
Now, come on, Patrick,
what is the word again?
Be honest. How often have you gone to a strip club and ordered coffee?
Who orders coffee at a strip club? That's bizarre.
Are they the Daco Vale?
Yeah, Daco Vale. I think that's the girl with like the see-through. They like wear lingerie.
Yes, there's a farm-to-table strip club in Portland.
Yeah.
But that's more...
There's a vegan strip club.
Sure.
Yeah, it's one of the more famous ones.
I don't like meat in my strip club.
What is the name? It's the one where they give you $2 bills and change for everything.
I don't know.
Casa Diablo.
Patrick knows the strip clubs.
My ex-girlfriend wanted to go there for her birthday. It's actually the only time I ever went to that one. It's crazy, that place. It's like well done. It's like less like a strip club and more like a, what do you call it? Like not a cabaret show, but a burlesque show.
No, one of the few things I was told when I moved to Portland was that they had more strip clubs per capita than any other city.
I'm pretty sure that's true.
So I think that's less true now than it was then, honestly.
Yeah.
Just because with the gentrification of the city, I've seen a lot of strip clubs get knocked down.
It's like less shitty neighborhoods now.
Yeah, there definitely are. Or they were shitty neighborhoods and now they've been like...
Yeah, Mihail, you don't need a car.
Yeah, definitely. There's TriMet is decent.
There's trains and buses. You can get pretty much anywhere.
And if you get a bike, you're golden.
But don't rent one. Those rent-a-bikes, I think they're lame. I think they suck.
You mean the ones that you like in the
orange
streets?
Ones?
The orange ones?
Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine they're probably not great, but they're probably good enough.
I mean, it's better than nothing.
Yeah. If you do rent a bike, I'd say go to a bike shop and rent a nice road bike.
I'm sure that has to exist.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Pretty much, there's a ton of them that will rent out a bike. Walking works too.
Yeah, you can walk, bus, and train. That's how I get most places these days. There's also like Lyft and Uber.
I always make sure I can walk to the bar. That's super important.
Walking home from the bar is really the
part
yes. You have to be more concerned about.
The walk home from the bar seems to both take forever and no time at all.
Oh, by the way, while we're sitting here, we made a mistake that we got like 15 people sent us corrections this past week. Shiriam is of the blue Aja. She's blue-black, not green-black. I'm so sorry.
I went along with it.
So sorry.
I went along with it. We were talking about it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, green, sure,
Put
yeah."
that
totally.
on record. My bad. She has green eyes. I don't know. I don't know how I made that mistake.
I mean, she's black.
Yeah, I don't know. I assume I made that mistake because there's always such long descriptions about her striking green eyes, and I must have just somehow like thought she was green this whole time.
And I think she said something positive about men. So
Yeah.
we were like, oh, she said something positive about men. She must be green. Yeah, but I really do just think of her as like black. It doesn't really matter what her Aja is because like.
Yeah, everything, it's all trumped by black.
And she's sort of the mistress of the novices more than she is any individual Aja. She sort of has that. And then she's the keeper. I sort of think of her as having those offices more than I think of her Aja.
Sure. Oh, I kind of wanted to point out while I was reflecting a little, I think I was wondering, and I don't think I brought this up when we were in Threads of the Pattern, but I was wondering, do you think Ingtar is trying to redeem himself and that's why he's freaking out about the horn? Like he wants to get the horn to bring it to the light and redeem himself in...
I think that is the case after
the
portal stone, the flicker scene.
Flick.
Because I think that's when he realizes no matter what he does, being a dark friend never turns out well for him.
So which is why he ultimately sacrifices his life, because he's like, well, the one thing I can do is not live.
But I think right now what he's trying to do is get the horn so he can turn it over to Ishmael.
He is probably compelled. Well, we know he's compelled to do something. We don't know what.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?